I'm really delighted to have as my speaker here, Sokari Douglas Camp, who I first had the pleasure of meeting at LMH, in fact, and she was a guest of Andrew Fisher-Kane. I have to admit that sitting next to Sokari and talking to her, I thought she was one of the most interesting women that I had ever met. And I thought we have to get her to come to speak at LMH. And my interest was enhanced even more when she gave me very kindly a catalogue of some of her work, because it seemed to me a phenomenal body of work, much of which involved really kind of major, hefty kind of life-size pieces of work, you know, which actually are in steel mostly and various other metals. And I was so impressed because I don't think I'd ever met a practicing female sculptor before. I know that my experience is limited, and certainly things that were so unusual. So we got chatting and I said, you must come back here. I would really dearly like it if we could actually display some of Sokari's artworks in the college grounds, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to do that, but we're working on that, Sokari. But I think it's very fitting that Sokari has come to speak to us on International Women's Day. I've got the title of that right, I think, because she seems to me to embody something really significant about women's achievement and progress and creativity and originality and sheer strength of character and force of work. So I would just say a little bit about her background. I mean, I know she works, as I said, with steel and makes life-size figures and draws inspiration from a wide range of sources, including her Kalabari heritage, Nigerian culture, and her life in the UK. Her sculptures are held in museums across the world. She was born in Buguma in Nigeria, and she studied art at the Californian College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland, and she earned her BA at the Central School of Art and Design, and her MA from the Royal College of Art. And she's participated in many international workshops, and she has been awarded many awards, including I've got this right, it's a CBE, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, which is really impressive. And she was also considered for, you were shortlisted for the 4th Plinth in Trafalgar Square as well, which is really interesting. So you moved between Nigeria and the UK, and then you went to the USA. So can you describe what your childhood was like? Who were the most important figures within it, and possibly leading you to the path that you're now on?
Hello, everybody. Hello. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's International Women's Day, so I feel that it's right that I'm here. International Day today. My background is the first photograph that I have on screen. I don't know whether people online can see it, but it's myself and my mother, and it's an ancient photograph because it's one of those hooded pictures that were taken back in the day, and of course it's black and white, and I look as if I'm going to defend my mother just in case this hooded thing attacks us. And that is my background. It's kind of traditional and contemporary, and it's continued that way, that I keep my traditions, and I'm also introduced to the modern contemporary world, and that is my practice. So that's why I've chosen this picture as my introduction.
That's very good, isn't it? Yeah, I like that. It kind of contrasts the modern and the traditional.
Yes.
And who were the most important figures in your childhood? Because you've had an interestingly kind of mixed childhood, as you know, with different cultural influences. So can you tell us a little bit about that, including about your brother-in-law, Robin Horton?
Yes.
Who's a well-known anthropologist.
Yes, very well-known anthropologist and philosopher. He wrote a book just before he died called Patterns of Thought, which were philosophical essays about thought. He was my brother-in-law, but everybody in my home called him Uncle. And he married my eldest sister, and I was living with them, you know, kind of, I suppose, traditional African family group. I was living with them, and she passed away when I was about 4, when I was living with them. And he decided that he wanted to stay part of the family and brought me up, which meant that I lived with him on various Nigerian campuses in my childhood and was exposed to incredible cultural people, because it was an academic environment with wonderful playwrights and choreographers and philosophers and just very sociable people visiting. And I'd listen to these amazing conversations about Nigeria's independence and Renaissance and creation, really. They were cultural icons. You know, Wale Soyinka was putting on plays at Ibadan University, and choreographers were taking traditional practices and dances and things and putting them on the stage. So things were going from in the round to, you know, television or stage-like presentations, and our culture was taking a leap in a totally different direction.
And had Robin not been your brother-in-law, would this not have happened?
And this would definitely not have happened. Yes.
So it's one of those serendipitous kind of moments, perhaps, or not chances, but opportunities, perhaps, that led to this extraordinary creative development on your part.
Well, his family had an artistic background, so you know, wanting to be an artist wasn't anything strange.
Was there any? Am I wrong in thinking that there was somebody else in his family who was a sculptor?
Yes, they weren't a sculptor. They were an impressionist, American impressionist artist, which was quite novel. Someone that studied under Monet.
Wow.
Yeah, and but when it got to Robin's generation, the family said no more art. But art had never cropped up in my family. We didn't really have a word for what you know as art, but you know, my mother was a storyteller. One of her brothers was the town drummer, so we had a kind of art in us, but you know, we didn't have galleries where we expressed it or anything like that.
So what led you to art in the first instance? I mean, you obviously had these cultural influences from your brother-in-law.
My guardian encouraged me to get involved with art, but it was also the people around him, the cultural time in Nigeria that encouraged me towards art, because our culture could play globally. You know, the performances that we had in the round, the traditional performances and things, could be seen globally in the theatre. Wale Soyinka was doing plays, and Chinua Achebe was writing, and our culture was being exposed everywhere. So it was a Renaissance time for me as a Nigerian child in England at that time. And if you weren't aware of you know, the burst of energy from the colonies at that time, you weren't well informed, because there was a burst that was going on in the world. I'm not sure whether it was with commerce as well. It must have been with commerce as well, because I think oil was being discovered and all kinds of things, and it was a really energetic time.
Vibrant, yeah.
Yeah, very vibrant time.
So I'm really interested in what you work with, and what on earth led you to work with sculpting and with steel. I mean, this is hard work. I mean, this is sort of, you know, yeah. I mean, the illustration shows this. And often when you think of women in art, you don't necessarily think of women sculpting in steel. This is heavy stuff. So why were you led to work with this medium?
I was led to work with this medium because I started off making kinetic work, because I'm interested in theatre, I'm interested in costume, and these were the traditional things that I came with. And in art school, I made these pieces that moved around and shook a little bit like Tingley's work. They would attack themselves or just wave frantically for no reason. And I had to fix electric motors to steady the whole thing, and for the motors to make these mechanical movements. And I kept on asking the technician to weld me frames and things, and he said, "Sokari, you go and learn how to do this." So I was sent off on a course and learned how to weld. And I had a phase of making these kinetic works, and then my father passed away actually, and I made him a ceremonial bed. I made him a sculptural bed in honour of him, and I had to wear goggles and just weld forever, and it was a way of mourning, I guess. And that's how I got stuck with steel. But I love it because you can make something light hold up something heavy, and you can kind of have something look like fabric when it's not fabric. And people automatically think that it's heavy, but it's not. It's not heavy. It can be light because women wear jewellery and it's metal, and we hardly notice its weight, unless we're the Queen, of course. But it's something that we're familiar with, and so I went into steel quite easily because I was using lightweight sheets. It wasn't the bottom of ships like Anthony Cairo and things like that. I had the opportunity to just use lightweight filigree-like things, except that I made them life-size.
Right, and that's the I mean, one of my questions was, what are the satisfactions of the medium that you use, or the material that you use? And that presumably is its adaptability or its flexibility and strength.
It's strength, and the engineering that's involved with making something stand, and going against gravity or using gravity to make something stand. Is really interesting to me, and it is physical, but I enjoy that physicality, especially when it comes to large work.
So actually, this isn't a question that I've already prepared, but what is the largest thing that you have ever made? I'm just curious about this.
The largest thing is in Wales. It's on the way to Cardiff Station, and it's an unusual kind of long line that traces the landscape, and I have trucks and dips and houses half built, because in the old days when we travelled by train, the carriages used to get steamed up, and I would draw along the road the landscape, and I did this for I can't remember what they called themselves. It was some sort of regeneration programme for Cardiff and Wales, and I won a commission to make this thing.
Oh, that's wonderful. My sister lives in Cardiff, so I could probably see it if I caught the train.
Yeah, people don't really clock it, but it's there.
That's interesting. Right. So what were the main influences on your art as you developed a style of your own, do you think?
Style of my own? The main influence is this slide. Going back to International Women's Day again, the main influences is Kalabari culture. And when you talk about African culture, people often think of something that's stuck in aspic, but it's not. And the example that I can give is these women in this picture. Their head ties are made in Switzerland. Hayes head ties, The lacy blouses that they wear are made in Manchester. The main kind of costume or cloth around their waist is made in eastern Nigeria, and then the lower half is kind of made in Lebanon or somewhere. And these girls have Gucci glasses and pearls and fancy shoes on their feet, and that's us. We the men wear bowler hats and long shirts that look like Victorian nightshirts, and we're very, very fond of tartan-like material that's made in India. And all of that we call our traditional stuff.
And that's really curious. So that there isn't anything really traditional, or traditions are what we make
Of course.
traditional. Yes.
It's like the British drinking tea.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Is that your culture?
Exactly, yeah. Or the fact that we eat curry all the time, yeah. Yes, I know. No, it's interesting, isn't it? So it is a kind of polyglot, kind of incorporative culture.
Yes, that has layers of history. I mean, because my people are in the Niger Delta in Nigeria, so we traded with the Portuguese and, of course, the British, and we're part of the transatlantic trade. And there are layers of history in every culture, and that is incorporated in my contemporary work.
Which is really, really interesting. So another question I had to ask was actually the kind of work you produce as a woman and as a black artist as well. Actually, this is really interesting because we talked a little bit about you recently. I think we were having a conversation on the phone actually, where you talked about how the dominant influences were European when you were growing up, and you felt now that there was an opportunity really to acknowledge the significance of non-European influences in art. Do you feel that's changed as you've grown up and you've evolved as an artist? There's more widespread recognition.
Yes. There's more widespread recognition. And why is that? I think that is because of, I suppose, people from the rest of the world speaking up about their own influences in culture. Because I think it's always assumed that, everyone's inspired by what's around them here. And being brought up by Robin Horton, who was inspired by West Africa, I realised that needn't be the case. You can still talk on a platform and be influenced by somewhere else apart from Europe.
How about America? Because tell us about that chapter in your life. That's really interesting. How did you end up in the States, and what influence did that have on you?
I think I was a bit, yes, I am a bit strange. I ended up in the States because I'd spent most of my life in England from the age of 8. And I had two cultures. I had my Nigerian culture and my English culture. And I just thought, can I go somewhere else and be more educated, because I've really seen the Western world, and where else do you go but the States? So off I went to the States thinking I'd, do research there or be educated there and be really well educated and rounded. And I got there, and there were a lot of English tutors at the college that I went to. And some of them were quite strange because they kept on saying that I already had two very strong cultures, and why was I taking on a third? And I just, I'd never thought about it that way. And, there's people with umpteen cultures in the world. There's children that are made up of so many different kinds of people nowadays that stand before you that are probably in this university, and they're totally complete. So it shouldn't have been a worry. But I was only in the States for a short while. I don't think I found it easy, actually. I think my education wasn't bad, I suppose, from England, and I kept on getting all these credits. So before I knew it, in a year I'd done, more than half my degree. And
so you mean easy, as in academically, or academically easy? Yeah.
And I'd nearly finished my degree in a year, and then you just thought, well, I could be doing other things. And I also met my partner at that time, so I just took off and did other things. I didn't stay in America for long.
And did you find the experience of living in the States positive, or did you encounter prejudice, or the reverse? How did that feel?
No, they seemed a bit backward, actually, because in England we had punk.
Oh yes.
Which wasn't that welcoming to black folk. So I was quite happy to leave, but California was still in hippie phase when I arrived there. So I did feel a bit disjointed, but I enjoyed the clubs and things in the Bay Area. It was fun.
Now, it's International Women's Day today, and I'm interested in thinking about how your work expresses feminist themes. I mean, I'm going to ask quite a few questions about this, about the politics of your work. But one of them is a feminist theme, I think. I mean, you're very drawn to female figures, aren't you?
I'm just drawn to female figures or any kind of figure in costume.
Right.
Yes. I mean, I love costume. I mean, the girls before with their complicated costume with all the cultural influences.
So the next slide
kind of liberating.
Yeah, this slide that you're showing us now. What are we looking at here? And where is this?
Oh, this is outside the British Museum, and Ground Force, the funny gardening programme, took part in making a garden for the British Museum to celebrate Africa. And they included my work, and the piece I made was called Ashoibi, which is Yoruba, and I think the idea behind it is to make everyone the same, but to get your uniform to wear to become the same as everybody else is quite expensive for folk, but people will go out of their way to dress in the same way. I think the same experience goes with Nigerian weddings now, where people dress in the same costume, and it takes a little bit of cash to look the same as everybody else, but it's done with a little bit of stress and sweat. But when you do hang with the girls in this way, it's just quite empowering. And so Ashobi gives a kind of hot air, but fashion conscious air, and is very West African. But this piece has been to all sorts of places. It was in Amsterdam for a little while, in their Art South exhibition, which has a lot of outside sculptures, and people are exposed to lots of different ideas that are outside, a little bit like the Frieze art show in Regent's Park. So the pieces have wandered around.
So would you describe your work as political? I know from reading about it that you do address quite a lot of big themes in the modern world, including the abuses of power, colonialism, if you like, and ecological themes. I mean, themes about global warming and the problems of pollution and the planet. So can you talk us through how any of your individual pieces speak to your political beliefs?
Well, the area that I come from in Nigeria is where oil has been discovered. And the oil extraction, people set fire to gas. The gas that we want from Putin is just burnt off in Nigeria. And it's burnt off so that people can get to the oil. And the island that I come from, Kalabari people's capital, actually, is my hometown, Buguma. And the oil burning and stuff creates so much soot on an island where there aren't cars or tube or anything, that our noses are full of soot. And it's got a lot worse because we have oil bunkering and all kinds of things going on to create wealth for the youth and people that are ragamuffins. But all that, even in my 40s, annoyed me. And I didn't think, oh, I'm going to make political work. I just thought, oil Nigeria, prayer, because that's all we could do was, kind of pray that our luck would change somehow and people would be more responsible and more conscious of polluting our lands to make money for 5 people in Nigeria and to give easy oil to the rest of the world. Because, the oil that comes from Nigeria is used in Japan and everywhere, and yet where it comes from is being destroyed. So I didn't actually think, oh, I'm going to make political work. I just made work that talked about my family and what the country was going through.
Right. And what about anti-war themes? Because you've written about war and peace, or you've created pieces about war and peace as well.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about my 4th Plinth submission. The 4th Plinth, the time when I was one of the chosen artists for the 4th Plinth, it was when they let go of the usual people that would be given the chance to show on that platform. And Ken Livingstone asked for artists to think about the square and London and the things that London had that the rest of the world didn't. And at the time, we'd gone on the Iraq March and the bridges had shook with the numbers of people, and I think I went with my children who were terrified that we were going to be arrested. That's the Nigerian in them, you see. They didn't realise that you could go out and protest. And so I made a piece of work about protesting, because other parts of the world you couldn't possibly do that and not be beaten up. And that was an amazing license, I thought, that square has, because you can, every Saturday there's somebody protesting in that part of London, and so I wanted that to be on the plinth. But it was also the year of the disabled.
Yeah.
So Mark Quinn's Alison Lapierre piece was put on the plinth. But also I think Thomas Stutter was the second artist that won, and my piece, which is entitled No War, No War, didn't have a chance, but especially as, Mr. Blair was for war at that time. So, friends said, Sokari, what did you expect if you put that on your sculpture? But it was a truth, and I still think it was okay.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
But context and timing is all, isn't it, with these things?
Yeah,
sometimes.
and you really have to be restrained sometimes.
So one of the questions you probably saw that I was going to ask you was about masks, because I see these feature a lot in your work, actually. And it's very funny that when I was growing up, probably similar kind of time to you, actually, I remember thinking that African art was often, to me, epitomised by masks, but actually, curiously, masks as kind of, I don't know, kind of separate objects, that weren't associated with people wearing them. But now I've thought a bit more about it, and I'm wondering about how strange that was. Can you tell me a bit more about why you use masks and what your interest in them is in your work?
I don't really have just masks in my work, because Kalabari people think about the whole occasion of mask wearing, in that there's a costume that goes with it. It would be like only showing ballet shoes and not the tufty skirt or the tights, or the whole kind of complete stage paraphernalia to describe a ballet. So I go for movement, and I go for costume, and I go for the headdress, just because that is the complete picture. So I think it was a sort of European influence that would put a decapitated head on a stick in an ethnographic museum, without the costume, without the music, without the player, which is the most kind of important part of a masquerade performance, is the engine that plays this thing for us to watch, because it is about theatre. But of course, when you go and just pillage a place, you don't necessarily bring the native with you to feed at a museum or anything. Oh, that would be novel. So it's a sort of slightly warped view of my culture, anyway. And so I try to do a parallel story with the work that I produce.
That's really interesting, because I now see, and I haven't thought about it, as I said, very much, that those rather elegantly positioned masks that we see on stands, minimal, kind of poked up there, are actually kind of Western, interpretation of a Western style imposed upon.
Yeah, and usually they're shown at the wrong height.
Yeah.
Because on a man it would be bigger.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. So how did your style evolve and develop? And what are you working on at the moment? I have to ask. These are linked questions.
So this is my MA piece, and it's called Alaliaro, which is festival boat, and the thing of creating my style was looking at Kalabari culture and trying to produce a picture for people in a gallery of other views in the world. And I'm quite excited by boats and mechanics. So the oars of this boat moved back and forth, and there was a little audience. So when people came to see this piece of work, they would walk and stand with the audience as if they were, on a shoreline. And there's a little figure in the middle that was shown recently in a sculpture show that was put out by the Arts Council about women sculptors. And this work is in the Arts Council collection. And the little figure in the middle there made a noise, of course, Sokari style. She was, part of her mechanics were part of a car alarm, and she'd seem as if she was cheering, and as part of this ensemble, she would go, eh, like this as the oars went back and forth, and the masquerader at the back would rattle his feet, and see, there she is in the middle, and the works are made of steel and cut out and patterned, and I never used to put people's faces in my works, because Kalabari people believe that if something is too naturalistic, it would come to life, which is so in contrast to making things so realistic that they do represent life, which is the kind of my contemporary philosophy here. So I was totally out of sync, but the idea was that you could almost walk into these figures and pretend that you were dressed in this kit for me. And I wanted you to see a real masquerade, This is a masquerade in the street on one of our islands in the Delta. And here's your mask, fully dressed. And our Kalabari masks are actually on top of our heads to have a conversation with God kind of thing. So you don't even see the mask on the face. The mask is talking to the sky. But the exciting thing about this is that the masquerader has anklets and things that make noises and charge towards you. My masqueraders have been exhibited on the Champs-Élysées, and this particular piece was on the Champs-Élysées to welcome in the new millennium, and has ended up in Peckham. Yeah, ended up in Peckham, where people keep on saying it has something to do with Florence Nightingale. It doesn't. But it's had a bit of attention from a man that hasn't been very well. But he's it's okay. The sculpture's okay. But this is the beginning of my steel work, where I made a ceremonial bed for my father. This is the ceremonial bed, and it had kinetic moving parts on it, where there were little motors with handkerchiefs that would just brush the surface of where a body could have lain on the bed. And the whole thing rattled a bit, as a bed should. And it's part of the Smithsonian collection and is still visible, which is great for me. But, this is the metalwork that just kept me going through my time of mourning. But here is a picture of the Niger Delta and the flaring that goes on there and is changing our environment. The thing is that flaring here creates a hole in the ozone layer in Australia. So, one is never alone, really, when these things happen, even though it's, Royal Dutch Shell. So the Netherlands and Britain combined doing something like this to the environment in Nigeria. I took pictures of a flow station with Andrew. We were in a speedboat in the Delta and we raced off. But as we were racing away, I took this picture of a flow station and I wanted to illustrate it. I was commissioned to make a piece for a Japanese museum, and I decided to have this photograph and try to find a way of showing my welding as well as showing the environment that I supposedly came from. So this was the sort of practice run, and in the end the photograph was turned into an acetate image so that you could see my welding as well as seeing this kind of flow station thing that was part of my heritage. But in Kalabari, when we mourn somebody, we have photographs of them that we parade around the town with, and family members that of course look alike or similar or whatever. It's quite strange to see the deceased person and their living relative, so it's the same sort of face, and it's quite moving. So it's a photograph to show that this was part of our land that was being treated in this way. So, yeah.
And what is this that we're looking at?
We're looking at me rabbiting on about slavery and being conscious of slavery. As a sculptor, I have ideas of my own, and when I get asked to come up with ideas for commissions and things, I change tact and have to do research. And I had to do research about the Wilberforce's bill, I read about an ex-slave that said, they'll remember that we were slaves, but not that we were brave. And that moved me because these people were incredibly brave. And the people with slave heritage are amazing because they're alive and survived and they're here and they're around us and they're African. And, there are all these layered connections and, no child should be ashamed of being an African. So I wanted to present that as something to commemorate the abolition of slavery. So I made this piece and came up with words that said, from our rich ancestral life, we were born, bought and sold. Is that what it says? Bought and sold. But we were strong, we were brave, we survived. All the world is now richer. Because I wanted to tell the story of the whole saga, and I started off with a figure in just a wrapper, which is just a cloth that would be woven in Africa, and so quite thick and regal. And then it goes to a man that would have been one of the most tortured in a sugarcane plantation, and he has a cutlass and long johns tied at the waist, and he was bought, sold, and used. And then you have a maid that would be in the same category of being used, and she was brave. And then you have a Creole woman. It's the connections with places like Sierra Leone and Liberia, repatriated slaves, which is, history that is global and very much connected with Britain and the rest of the world. And these Creole people came to southeast London, and I had conversations with them in Andrew's old church, St. John's, and was educated about how their ancestors fought the War of Independence, and the Brits took them to Nova Scotia, and then eventually to Sierra Leone and Freetown. And, these girls wear something called Alice gowns, which are quite West African.
We're now
right there.
Yeah. So we're now in your House of Commons exhibition. Yes.
Yes.
I would like to talk about this because I think these images are really remarkable. When I first saw this in the catalogue that you kind of gave me,
yes,
I sort of thought that I was looking at suits of armour somehow in a kind of baronial setting. I mean, it's Pugin's sort of Gothic baronial backdrop in the House of Commons, and then when you look more closely, you see that actually that's not what you're looking at. It's not baronial. It's actually something that's a critique, if you like, of the culture in which it's housed. So. And it is quite extraordinary. So what kinds of responses have you had to this? I mean, I think it's an amazing site, really. What did people say? Just curious about the responses. Yeah.
The responses were amazing because it was a lottery to get into that space.
Was it?
Yeah. And it was just pure luck. Simon Hughes put my name in as our local MP, and I was there for a week. But the week that these figures went in was the day that the anti-slavery lobbyists were going to speak to the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And this is between all the houses, and it's an opulent environment. And for these things to be a picture of slaves is very different from the background that is so kind of rich. And these works went to St. Paul's, and again, it was a very rich, incredible environment. And they were also shown in Bristol Cathedral, and there they actually stood on the flagstones of slavers' graves, and the priest came along and said, "This is a very cathartic moment." So I've had all sorts of responses for these figures, but my aim is to have them, instead of the usual bollards in London, standing facing the public, and for people to rollerblade past on the words and past the figures. But I've been working on that for 11 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to any young person now who is involved in fine art, who wants to be an artist? What would you say to them?
I'd say, don't do it.
We have some here, so.
No, I think it's very, very important to almost grow your voice, and keep to your ideas and try and fine-tune them to be as you as possible, because you're unique, and there's no better way to practice than to, make yourself as fine as possible, really. And I know that that's tough, but, art is a wonderful profession, I think, just because if you're a ducker and diver, it keeps you on your toes, without doubt. And there's so many things, so many avenues that you can take, especially now when we need so much conversation about the new style of life that we need to lead because of the environment and because of global awareness and cultural awareness and so much. I think art is needed in the conversation because we just have an intuitive language that is needed.
Thank you so much, Sokari. Thank you.